Please welcome to the stage former director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Rohit Chopra, the Roosevelt Institute president, Elizabeth Wilkins, the founder and executive director, More Perfect Union, Faiz Shakir, and executive director of Resonate, Navin, Nayak, and executive director of Fair Share America, Kristen, Crowell.
Well, thank you all for joining us this afternoon for this conversation. We timed this film to pose the question for all of us to reflect on. And we're going to start with you, Rohit. So just in terms of setting the stage, since Trump took office, what has the White House administration's approach been to big corporations and corporate power?
Well, in some ways, I want to answer by thinking about the video we just saw. And there is really a few parts of that in some ways explain where we are today. You know, we saw the map of the houses of the foreclosures going away. What wasn't in the video was that the people foreclosing on those homes, actually their banks got bigger and more powerful afterward, and none of them were held accountable. We heard about some of the things going on in farm country, and what have we seen over the past few weeks by the Trump administration? A wild bailout of Argentina, selling out soybean farmers, selling out ranchers. And honestly, Kristen, yes, it's pretty bad what they're doing, but a lot of people are asking, what was happening in the last administration too? Were we doing enough to actually fix those underlying problems? Or were a lot of people also canoodling with those who already had money and power? And I think the future going forward, we can say all the things they are doing right now to sell people out, but unless we also have the courage to figure out what we did wrong, there will be no real path forward.
So what can we do about it? What things can be done at the state and federal level to ensure that we're having an adequate pushback against corporate power?
Well, look, I think it's good to push back on what we're seeing, but also we are not powerless in this. We actually have lots of states passing laws that actually are moving the ball forward. We have state attorneys general suing some of the biggest corporations who are abusing their power, and frankly, we have more people going to court themselves. But Kristen, I really feel like the debate often is, should the opposition be catering more to big corporations, moderating their stances on fighting power? And I actually think that is a recipe for utter disaster. And the work that you and others are doing are reminding us that people really want to see their government stand up for something rather than just roll over and play dead.
It was pretty astounding to me as someone who, I split time between Wisconsin and Chicago, and for a long time have lived in a bit of a progressive bubble myself. And so being out in the country and in towns that often no one has come to, organizers have not been able to reach or have chosen not to reach, it was pretty astounding to see how common our values are and how much more aligned the American public is than we are made to believe. We are made to believe that we are against each other on more fronts than what I experienced on the ground. So, you know, as administrations cozy up to corporate power and create special incentives and deals for them, what are the real life consequences for everyday Americans and working people?
Well, I'll defer to others for where their head is on this. I mean, I will tell you, just like you're saying of where you traveled to, while I was in office, I went to Grand Island, Nebraska, which is grand, but not an island. And there were people there who were directly their farms and ranches were all going bankrupt because of big agribusiness, because of the failure to enforce long-standing antitrust laws, agriculture laws, and all of it, they were seeing in their own state really farmland being sold to investors all over the world, to even private equity funds and others. And I really feel that a lot of people just watched rather than actually speaking up. And in some ways, the fact that you show up and the fact that you say, what would you do to fight that power together, I think that has a lot of promise for all of us.
Okay, thank you so much. We're going to go now, we're going to come to you, Faiz. I don't know, from my perspective, things feel different right now in the country and on the ground. What do the current trends of rising corporate power and populism mean in relationship to our democracy?
Well, in many ways, we're fighting for economic democracy. I mean, the understanding for many of you and all of us is that political democracy at stake. We see an authoritarian wielding power and acting in all the corrupt ways that Rohit talked about. By the way, speaking of that, you look at a lot of the donors to his inauguration in the East Room. How are these enabled? They're enabled by corporate corruption, right? Amazon, Apple, they pay for it. Pilgrim's Pride was the biggest donor to his inaugural. Those of you who work in agriculture know what Pilgrim's Pride is. You know, and what do they get in return? Faster poultry production. Lines speed up. Workers work harder. Produce more, get less. That's what the exchange was. That's the quid pro quo. And when you look at the economic democracy you're fighting for, a lot of people have given up on it. You sense it out there. And if you're not living and thinking rationally, if you haven't gotten a sense of despair and can anybody fix this? And you're right to feel that way, but then we've been given up on the idea that we as humans can govern ourselves. So the idea of right now fighting for economic democracy is to try to devolve power back into the hands of different kind of ownership structures. Right now we got an authoritarian who runs a government. We also have authoritarians who run the economy. And how you contend with and confront authoritarianism is to devolve that power back down. So what are we all going to be fighting for is some versions, I hope, of new ownership designs. Workers who lead businesses, worker co-ops, workers on boards, different kinds of collectives. One of the more inspiring things I'm seeing right now is tenant unions. Right? We're all familiar with labor unions. They're in the video, UAW. There's also tenant unions arising. What are they fighting for? Well, just better economic control over the places in which they dwell. The opportunity to change the conditions and the economic strangleholds upon them. These kinds of models of different ownership designs coming from the grassroots and being modeled in localities across the country should be giving us hope of a different path forward. See ranchers, agricultural workers coming together to form cooperatives. One of the more inspiring things, I was talking to hopefully the new mayor of New York City, Zohran Mamdani, is he's thinking about leveraging the power of a city that can buy and contract food, not only to, as many of you have heard, build grocery stores that are municipally owned, but potentially even work with farmers with the amazing purchasing power that you have to say, okay, why don't you grow your food? We'll buy it. I'll incentivize you to grow food. Now we're thinking creatively. Now we're thinking with economic democracy in mind.
What are some of the lessons that progressives can take away right now from how the right-wing populists are framing working class interests?
Well, the right-wing populists have been successful, so we'll give them that in the sense that they have built a movement. I would Make America Great Again is a movement, has a lot of people associated with it. There's a sense of, it means something greater than ourselves. And the things that I take from that, I'm a movement-oriented person myself, which I managed Bernie Sanders' campaign, felt very strongly about our fight oligarchy efforts. We're trying to build a movement of our own around this. And it's to learn that, in this day and age when people are getting cynical and upset about the functioning of government, they want to be, I think that the notions of American spirit is that we want to serve something greater than ourselves. Who's calling us to serve something greater than ourselves? I think there's a reason why people sign up for serve in the military, want to be teachers, want to serve as nurses. You see those nurses who are on the picket, you know why they're on the picket? Not for their own paychecks, but because they want the patients to have better outcomes. Think about that. It's in the American spirit that you are sacrificing your own to try to help others. And we're looking for, I think, for the integrity of people who think that way and operate that way and can create the content and speak to people in those ways. Right now, I think I'm glad you're doing it, but it's not being done enough that we are modeling grassroots engagement across this country. We should be soliciting more, even in the midst of this ACA tax credits fight. How many of you, pause and think about this, have seen from a left of center outlet or a Democratic politician featuring the stories of people and the people themselves who are struggling with healthcare, who are going through possibly unaffordability? You saw it in this video. How many of us are taking this opportunity to reconnect with grassroots actors? I tend to think not only is that the right political path forward, it's the right social media way forward, and it's how you build the movement that confronts right-wing populists.
There's a lot of debate right now in the atmosphere about fighting for the independent or centrist voters. How do we build a truly people-centered movement that resonates across demographics, across party lines?
And I know you believe this too, Kristen, is that those labels mean nothing. I mean, you go out in the world and you talk to regular people, they don't describe themselves as any of those things. They describe themselves as, and one of the reasons why we care about the class struggle and the economic populism is because that's the way they think about their lives. They're waking up every day to say, hey, can I as a small business person make it? Can I as a plumber make it? Can I as an Uber driver make it? Can I work at this Amazon warehouse and take care of myself? And the answer for most people is no. And what they're trying to check for you is, one, do you know their life? Do you know anything about their lives? And we have to all operate with some humility. I don't know everything about your lives, but I have an interest, a curiosity in understanding your lives and the struggles associated with it. What are the issues around retirement? What are the issues around healthcare? And that I want to serve to advance those. And I do, as much as we all care about policy and the fight for class struggle and making sure that working people, not billionaires, are benefiting, it is coupled hand in hand with the integrity question. People they're not dumb, they have a sense of it. Do you know? Do you care? Do you see what I'm going through? And when they have the BS detector, and when they see it and they know, yes, I want to put you into positions of influence, I see advocates on my behalf, but when they sense that you give them the words, but not the integrity of wanting to follow up on those words, do you know what they do? They penalize you even greater. They say, screw that. I'll go with it. Well, I'll go with the other one. I'll go with this other guy's offering, or this other people are offering disruption, burn it down, fine. But until you guys fight for the working class words that are coming out of your mouth, I'm going to hold you accountable. So I think we're trying to pair the integrity question with all of the class stuff that we're talking about.
Right, thank you. We're going to come to you, Elizabeth. Thank you for joining. And thank you for, if you haven't read the 88-page report that just went public, I highly recommend it. So thank you for that contribution to the dialogue. What policies would actually deliver affordability and power for working people right now in this country?
So I promise I'm going to answer that question in a second, but I just want to pull out something that Faiz said and drawing on something that Rohit said. Which is the degree to which more unites people than divides people, the way that we think about it here in Washington. So you were at Grand Island, Grand but not an island, talking to farmers. Last week I was in Detroit. The city of Detroit is suing a private equity firm because they've bought up 1,600 properties in the city and have tokenized them as cryptocurrency and are selling that cryptocurrency overseas to overseas investors. And in a overwhelmingly black city, we have a city government where the government officials on their own time are actually going door to door to tell tenants what is happening to their property, how to put their rent in escrow, how to save their homes. And those urban black renters have much more in common with the farmers that Rohit met than I think most people in this town would think. And I think that is part of what you guys are showing as you do your bus tour, is that there is so much more that unites people about their experiences and what actually matters to them than what divides them. And that is a real opportunity that we sort of need to get this town to understand much better than it does. Professional hazard of being head of the Roosevelt Institute. I really like to talk about Roosevelt. I was very excited to see some Roosevelt nods. Like the roadmap here for a progressive policy agenda is not hard. We have done it before, right? It is, how do you deconstruct power at the top? How do you, as Faiz was saying, construct power from the bottom? How do you lay a floor of economic security underneath people? And how do you create democratic governing institutions that are resilient to corporate influence and nimble and capacious enough to manage markets towards public ends? Like, that is a 90-year-old playbook that we already knew not only worked at the time, but ushered in a decades-long era of shared prosperity for a wide swath of Americans. In this moment, how do we think about the affordability crisis? Well, there's like two sides to the affordability crisis. There's prices and there's wages. Prices are many of the prices that people are facing right now are the product of extraordinarily broken and extractive markets, where we have corporations that are looking to price exactly at where people are able to pay and extracting value rather than sharing that value with others. We have not only incomes, but power in the workplace that has eroded for decades and that people can feel. And then the other thing I would say about the affordability crisis that I think is really important and that videos like yours show is that it actually is not just, I mean, yes, it is about meeting your weekly budget. But like, people are crying on video, not because they cannot afford their basics throughout the week, but because they don't feel a sense of possibility and security and agency in their lives, right? This is not just, I can't make ends meet. It is, there was a great line in this piece that Alvaro Bedoya just wrote where he said, someone said to him, I feel like there's a noose around my neck and I'm standing on a melting block of ice. That is actually what people are feeling. And so our policy responses to the affordability crisis have to be to change the structure of markets to deliver something different, but they also have to go deeper. They have to say what kind of lives people want to lead. How can we redistribute productivity, time, care, so that people can actually have a meaningful life? And then how do we make people feel that we're actually fighting for them? So that not just are they struggling through their days and they are trying to make ends meet, but they know there's actually somebody on their side who believes in their ability to make a better life. And then the last thing I'd say is on taxes. Taxes are crucially important for paying for the services and the goods that we all need. Absolutely. But taxes are also crucially important for that kind of economic democracy that Faiz was talking about. This is not just about paying for programs. It's about restructuring the power distribution in our economy so that people can have power over their lives again. And I think that's a crucial part of the agenda going forward, is to say we tax not just to make sure that we can pay for the health care and the child care that people deserve, but we also tax to make sure that we actually have a distribution of power in this country that is consistent with democracy and agency.
One of the things that we heard consistently, and I did 52 town halls, so I feel like I have a little bit of credibility at this point, is there is so much power in sharing what is happening to them and liberating us ourselves from the blame and shame that people also feel when they cannot take care of their family, when they cannot make ends meet. And that the realization that is happening as we are in rooms of thousands of people is that we are setting ourselves free from the narrative that somehow this is our fault, that we aren't doing enough to take care of our families. And I do think there's a massive role for our work, and I'm going to pivot to what is the role of a think tank in this moment, tee you up nicely, to help liberate us from the shame that we place on ourselves when we can't meet our family's needs. And what is the path forward there?
Yeah, so I do think that a pathology that we have sometimes is that we come with 5-point policy plans when people are looking for belonging and meaning. And so one thing that I think that think tanks need to do is to figure out how not just to speak to the policy plans that we need, but to speak to the values that those policies need to enable us to display to people, and the authenticity that people need to see from us, which means we need policies that show that we can fight. We need policies that divide the us versus them differently and allow us to take a stand. And we do need policies that actually, we need research and policy work that, to your point, says these are not about individual failures, these are about structures that have been more powerful than you for a long time. One of the things that, I like really try never to say the word neoliberal anymore, but here we go. Like one of the things about neoliberalism is it's not just an economic or political system, it is a cultural system that does both support individual selfish rent-seeking behavior and privatize pain the way that you have just described. And so some of the balm for that, and this is not really a think tank, is movement building, is belonging. Like we can't fight that without some sense of collectivity and agency together. I also think think tanks really need to not so much this is something that I think a lot of us learned in government. We can't totally separate the policy from the like small p politics. That if we are building a new kind of world, then policy has to be deeply informed by, motivated by the lived experiences of people, and we need to take lived experience as true expertise in a way. And we need to find ways to involve people and give them agency over what we're building. And so think tanks have a particular role in that, movements have a particular role in that, but to ensure that think tanks are doing our work in a way that takes people's involvement, people's agency, the magnetism of ideas, and the values that people need to see us display seriously as a part of our policy design is, I think, crucial in this moment.
Then I have one last question, which is, you know, we're in a moment where a lot of the national conversation is centered around democracy. How do we better organize around pocketbook issues and daily affordability? Again, professional hazard, I will just go back to like FDR. That was a moment where lots of people were thinking maybe democracy is not such a good idea, that economic collapse was a function of democracy's inability to manage capitalism, and so like maybe actually fascism wasn't a bad idea, and we like sent people to Italy to check out how those political institutions were organized, because maybe that was a better idea. And one of the things that administration did was demonstrate very clearly by attacking the core problems in people's material and economic lives that democracy could deliver better than any other form of political arrangement. I think we have to really recognize that while many people in this room truly do get a dopamine hit from like voting, that most people are worried about whether or not their political system is going to deliver for them materially. And so we have to do policy and politics in a way that shows that democratic institutions can and will deliver and show up in the way that people care about most. Thank you. All right, we're coming to you next, Navin. You work on a team that studies messages that are cutting through both online and offline. What are you seeing around economic populism, and where might it be resonating?
Sure. Just for quick context, we do sort of at Resonate track conversations across the social media landscape, and it is worth sort of orienting everyone to the distinction between sort of the message and then the delivery. Our side spends a lot of time trying to craft and perfect messages that no one ever hears. And we need to do a lot more work actually figuring out how we're going to get people's attention to these challenges. And we do see, for a variety of reasons, which I can talk through, that the core of this message can generate attention when it's done well. One is, and you know, people like to think that that sort of clickbait and anger is the primary driver, and obviously that has its place in the internet, particularly on Twitter. But a lot of studies have been done showing that actually surprise or something that people were not expecting or something that actually feels new to them is way more likely to generate interest. And I'll give a couple of examples. I do think, rather than just saying the same thing, James Tallarico is having a real moment in getting people's attention around this fight. And rather than just simply pointing out that, this is a fight with the 1% of billionaires, what he does that is wildly effective online is he contrasts the 1% that people want us to focus on, whether that is the 1% of trans Americans or the 1% of Muslims or the 1% of another group, and contrast that with the 1% we should be focusing on. And I think these sorts of, so that's one element. The other, and Faiz hit on this, and More Perfect Union is a great example of this kind of content. People actually want to hear from people. They want to be able to see themselves in the content. And the more it is sort of a politician giving talking points, I can guarantee you it's not going anywhere. The more it is a politician using their channels to give other Americans a voice, the way more likely and to share their story. And then the third thing, which is as old as human storytelling, is you need a villain. You need to actually have and a hero and an element of this. And in this story, workers people banding together are often the heroes. And I think what we're too uncomfortable with on our side is actually being clear about the villain. And I think what works online particularly well is when it isn't just a politician. There are real limits for a lot of Americans, and a lot of people hit on this. If one side is just saying the villain is the other side, for a whole section of Americans, that feels like what they've actually gotten tired of. When there is a story that has a villain, whether it's a corporation, a CEO, it really captures a different element, and a conversation opens up with people who don't feel like you're just pushing them into a partisan corner.
I'm watching this happen live in a little town called Port Washington, Wisconsin. It's about 12,000 people on the shore of Lake Michigan, and folks are coming together to fight against an AI data center. And they're having conversations that say, like, we're gonna not talk about our political affiliations, but we're gonna take on this corporation because they're eating up our farmland, they're destroying our environment, and they're coming for what is ours. And so there are live examples that give me a ton of hope about framing this properly and helping shift the narrative and the blame.
Yeah, and I think for me, one of the sort of underlying currents that's actually been hopeful in the last several years is, for the longest time, Republicans, the other side, have done a very effective job of demonizing government as the sort of core, source of problems going back to the 80s, right? And something a lot of Democrats sort of embraced over time. And the fact is they were very successful. If you looked at data 20 years ago, people overwhelmingly wanted government to do less. And that was sort of, in my political career, the consistent sort of pattern. That is not the case today. For the first time in 20 years, and it started pre-COVID, it accelerated during COVID, and it has continued to stay high. People are actually hungry for a government to be fighting on their side. They're deeply skeptical that it will happen. And in the absence of that, you are seeing stories of people actually banding together and sort of, to the narrative, I think a lot of people, I do really buy into this notion that people feel like they've lost agency. I think they felt like democracies, government, were the place they could, park their agency to be fighting on their behalf. And in the absence of that happening, you see more and more people doing this. But there is a real opportunity for a conversation that I think was harder for us to have 15 years ago when the overwhelming public sentiment was for less government role. That is not the case today, whether it is around privacy issues with big tech, even in thinking about the role of schools. I think across this, and certainly obviously on the both consumer and worker side, there's a real desire and a recognition that in the absence of government stepping in on behalf of Americans, that people are left at a massive disadvantage. And
now, dealer's choice, I'm going to have one question for everyone. what lessons are we not learning right now? And what keeps you up about us potentially making mistakes and missing the moment that we're in? And if you want to go the hopeful side and give great advice, we'll allow that as well. But I feel very much that this is our moment to screw up if we don't recognize
I'm gonna
what's in front of us.
pull Rohit into this one because I'm going to offer a thought, but Rohit's lived this, so he's going to have better thoughts about it than I will. In the 4 years that Trump, this is answering the question, what are we not doing right now? Because we are doing good things, so please, there are good things, but we're going to focus on what we're not doing. In the 4 years that he was not president, Steve Bannon referred to those years in between as the lion in winter. And Trump was a lion in winter, essentially getting stronger and building up something. And I believe it because it's true that they came in, we referred a lot to this project, 2025, right? Project 2025, a lot of it was talked about. And what they did in the first 100, now whatever, what number are we at now? 200, 300, 400, 300 days? And they have been a ball of action, a whirlwind of action. And in order to do that action, it's not just to have like, oh, this is nice, this is a good idea, we should kind of like, let's see if we can work with Congress to do this. No. That's not what they did. They put the bully back in bully pulpit. And they said, yeah, there's things we're going to do with Congress. Don't worry. That's a one big, beautiful bill. We'll do some stuff there. We're going to know executive authorities that we have that are going to go after universities, we're going to go after media, we're going to go after God knows what, everything under the sun. Every single day. For this foreign country, that foreign country, we'll bomb some ships. Every day there will be action out of this place. And what I think is less appreciated as this action's occurring is how much work was done to understand what authorities existed, but also the risk-taking nature. They say, hey, go ahead, sue me. Guess what? We're going to get this thing done. We're not governed by lawyer bureaucrats. Now, we are a different value set. We believe in the rule of law. But there's something to learn from being action-oriented and saying, we're going to lean forward and show you this government is doing something. We're not sitting here waiting for the lawyer to give us the next 18 pages of whether we can do this action against Visa or MasterCard. Your reaction to that?
Yeah, I felt that during the first Trump administration, the people who really did their homework and started organizing, started building, were able to dunk on the opposition. There was time after time, I remember we started uncovering in 2017, 18, 19, all sorts of powers that had never been used before. There was no need to pass a single law. And from everything from Made in USA meat to medical bills and debt collection to junk fees, a lot of them were little. But all the laws were on the books in plain sight, and you have to actually look it up. You cannot just complain. You have to actually strategize. And what I would add to that, Faiz, is that do not defend the broken status quo. When we see them disrupting all of it, we cannot simply cling to the past and protect something that didn't work. They're doing some weird things. They're taking equity stakes in companies. They're doing all sorts of things with the tax code rather than some of it, I mean, it's crazy. But actually, they have done their homework to see the authorities they can use to do it. And they're gonna see whether it's gonna get struck down or not. But at least they're trying. And I think what a lot of people who want to take back the reins and fight the abuses of concentrations of power, the answer may be hiding in plain sight on the laws of our land.
I'm just going to sort of like pile on to this theme. There are many of us who are in the Biden administration who are looking on at what the Trump administration is doing, 99% in horror and 1% in jealousy, right? Of like, oh my goodness, like we wanted to do X, Y, and Z, and why didn't we? We never did, right? And one answer is, many people did not do their homework, and that is a project that starts now. Another is, I think, that our side is different. We care about the rule of law, but also we're kind of risk averse. We are kind of, authority regarding good eggs. So I think there is both a project of doing homework, finding all of those authorities, but there's also a project of radicalizing our folks to say the problems aren't small. The problems are enormous. The project that you did here is a part of that. It is bringing to life, again, not just that there's an affordability problem, but there's a humanity problem, and that those humanity problems have real faces. And what can we do to radicalize ourselves so that we not only do the work of finding those authorities, but we are motivated and ready to use them, even if it feels different from the sort of risk aversion that we have had before. I always say, I wish we could take more organizers and make them policymakers, that all of our policymakers need to think like organizers, both in terms of urgency and in terms of being rooted in people's lived experience and being motivated by that to do the utmost in service of creating a structure that is actually going to deliver for them.
Again, because it's the space I spend my time, I really worry we actually aren't building the communications infrastructure to, and this is, I think, a really important part, to pre-tell the American people what's wrong and what we want to fix, and then to constantly be reminding them so that we're actually heard when, hopefully we're in power in doing this. I think there's obviously a lot to admire about what Zoran Mamdani's doing, but I think one of the things that's underappreciated is voters actually know what he wants to do. I follow the Virginia governor's race very closely, and I don't think you would find a voter who has a sense of, let's say, what Abigail Spanberger wants to do. And the challenge with that is not just in winning the election, which I think it creates that problem, but actually in governing, and actually being able to then come back to the American people and tell them what you did or what you're fighting to do and who's to blame for why it didn't get done. It's setting up that narrative and being able to communicate at scale and volume. And we're obviously never going to have Fox News, but we are so far behind in sort of being aligned in punching through and getting attention around these fights even. I'll give an example, and just, we've had moments in many ways the healthcare fight and the shutdown have been the first moment this year where a storyline has, I think, broken through around what Democrats are fighting for. But even on most given days, there isn't the level of discipline to constantly be creating content around this and finding the stories of people. I mean, this Saturday, 24 million people are going to start shopping for healthcare. The flood of potential content could be enormous. And I don't think our side, for all of the many important efforts that are happening, is poised to spend the first week of November highlighting just both the Snap stories and that. And I think there's a lot of work to do in terms of building that communications capacity.
I'm going to give everyone one final word, and then we're going to head out and let the state folks tell us how it's done.
I'll just bridge that comment.
Yeah.
So during the Biden administration, More Perfect Union was doing a number of videos, things like that Rohit and others were doing in the administration. What I would say about this is that a lot of the content actually started to build. I mean, we're growing, but it was growing during that period of time when I sensed that a lot of other outlets were struggling. We were gaining viewers and audience, and part of the reason why was we were doing something that the administration was struggling doing on its own at the top, which is to identify the villain. Navin's right on the money. That if we're taking on, junk fees, and Rohit was doing a great job of it, just identifying the names of those corporations, the activities that they're engaged in, and telling people, because that associates them with the struggle that they're also in. And in addition to that, so just more than identifying that villain, was to also tell you about the journey. Too often on our side we'll say, hey, at the end of this journey, you're going to have the earned income tax credits been expanded. At the end of this journey, Medicare will be able to negotiate prescription drugs. Congratulations. What's more compelling as the story is the whole journey. That at the front of this, we're taking on the pharmaceutical companies to do something. And in that journey, you have opposition, that these people are taking us on. This is what Trump wakes up every day doing. He is eager to tell you about everybody who is taking him on. Poor victim, this guy. Sadly, everybody is attacking him. Now, from our side, where we go through and fight for Medicare prescription drug negotiation, no point administration by policy design wanted to open up the doors and say, we are fighting big pharma. Let me tell you how. Let me tell you how much they're spending. Very much a partisan fight, very much a closed-door policy-making process that doesn't lend itself, when you're in power, to doing the compelling storytelling that you do more easily when you're outside of power. Oh, well, we don't have power anymore, so I can just go attack crypto, I can go attack pharmaceutical. What's more compelling and more useful is now you have power, and I want to let you know how they're taking us on, what we're going to do to solve for this. There's a rulemaking that matters a lot to your lives. There's a way that we engineer some of these such that when we do get power, and I think it's coming, that we're learning some of the lessons about what works.
I guess I will say a hopeful thing, which is riff off of a tiny thing that Rohit said, which is we are seeing a moment where government is intervening in markets in ways that we have never seen before. It's happening in ways that don't explain the why or the how or the who for. But I do think we are in a moment where the lines are scrambled in terms of what it means to how we all feel about deregulating markets versus managing markets towards public ends. And there is an opportunity to redirect some of the alienation that people feel into some incredibly transformative policy if we can both harness that energy and just drive a Mack truck through the opening that we are seeing right now in terms of interventions in markets that could be used for public good. So I, as horrible as this moment is, I have a lot of hope that in these moments we have the most policy creativity, and in some ways, some of the things we have been fighting against for a long time have been undermined for us, and we should take maximum opportunity from that.
Yeah, Kristen, the only thing I'll add is that courage is contagious, and the people who were in the videos speaking about the X-ray technician, Sarah, what they were doing and how it affected them, I think that it becomes very easy to be timid when there's a powerful, very powerful person on the other side. But the more people that are able to speak, it catalyzes others to do it. And I think we have to make sure we create that spirit for everyone in our country.
Wonderful. Let's give this panel a warm round of applause. Thank you all.
Thank you.